Good, af- Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first session, Conflicts, NGOs, and Socio-Economic Development, Securing the Civil Society. My name is Arhi Shakolkar. I'll be your host for the first session. For this session, we have IPS Yashovardhan Azad as a session chair. Yashovardhan Azad, sir, has a wide variety of experience in national security and governance. After nearly 40 years as a career intelligence and law enforcement official, he belongs to the 1976 batch of IPS and has served as the police chief of 4 districts and deputy chief of a range of services before moving on deputation to the Joint Intelligence Committee, JIC, which is the apex body of intelligence analysis for the Union government. In 1997, he moved to the Intelligence Bureau, IB, India's premier agency for internal security. In his career as an intelligence professional, he dealt with counterterrorism, security risk assessments for the nation's top leadership, and on international security assignments, was placed in Pakistan and Bangladesh. He served as a special director in the Intelligence Bureau and later appointed as Secretary of Security to the Government of India. He has also been awarded the Police Medal for Meritorious Service and the President of India's Medal for Distinguished Service. After his retirement, he has also served as a Central Information Commissioner. Currently, he is serving as a chairman and co-founder of Deep Strat LLP. The speakers for this session will be Shri BVS Saikrishna, who is currently the director and CEO of Pinaca Technologies. He, he is an IIT Guwahati alumni and an IRS officer of 2011 batch. He has served as his ACDC tenure in Mumbai and has held assignments in wing, corporate, and business charges before going on deputation. On deputation, he has served for 5 years at senior leadership roles in the National Critical Information Infrastructure Protection Center in India, which is the premium agency which works under the Prime Minister's office. He is also the recipient of Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Award for outstanding contribution at the NCIPPC. He works actively with the law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies in filling the critical technology gaps which are present in the Indian state and its responses. He, he is currently running 5 cybersecurity and machine learning companies which have offices across the country. Next, we have is Dr. Anshuman Behera. Dr. Anshuman Behera is an associate professor in conflict resolution and peace research program at NIAS. He is a trained political scientist. Dr. Behera has worked with the Institute of Defense Studies and Analysis, IDSA, and Institute for Conflict Management, ICM, in New Delhi before joining NIAS as an associate professor. His main areas of research are in the field of political violence and internal conflicts in India, Nepal, and Bangladesh, democracy and governance in India, political theory, and the social impact of development. Apart from his extensive work, he has also done a thorough work on Maoist insurgency and, and militancy across South Asia. Dr. Behera has also written on insurgencies based in Nepal and Myanmar. Governance. He has further written on governance in Northeast states and the social impact assessment of the infrastructure projects in India. These are the current areas of his research. Courses on theoretical constructs of understanding conflict, qualitative research methodology in social sciences, and approaches to conflict resolution. Next we have is Rami Desai ma'am. Ma'am is an author, anthropologist, and a scholar of the Northeast region of India. She focuses on the ethnic identity, tribal issues, and insurgency. She also comments and keeps a track of development on the Indo-Pacific field and current affairs. She has 2 books in collaboration with Manipur University. She has a weekly column on First Post and is presently Distinguished Fellow at the India Foundation present in New Delhi. Last but not the least, we have Dr. Abhinav Pandya. He is the founder, director, and CEO of Usanas Foundation, an India-based security and foreign policy think tank. As a CEO, he has curated 2 international security and foreign policy conferences titled Maharana Pratap Annual Geopolitical Dialogues of 2022 and 2023. He is a Cornell University graduate in public affairs and a bachelor's from St. Stephen's College, Delhi. He has completed his doctoral degree from Jindal School of International Affairs. His second book, Terror Financing in Kashmir, has been published by Routledge. In the past, he has served in the position as the advisor to the former governor of Jammu and Kashmir on security issues during the critical time when the Kashmirs when Kashmir special status, which is the Article 370, was revoked. He also has an extensive experience on conflict resolution, intelligence, and intelligence dynamics in Kashmir. He has extensively written for various think tanks, journals, and newspapers. Before I invite Yashovardhan sir, I would request the audience to kindly turn off their mics. Please write your questions in the chat box, which will be answered during the Q&A session. Sir, the floor is all over to you. Thank you, sir.
Engage. Civil society is war, as Mr. John said. And the accountability of the NGOs, the dimensions of this work, and a critical study in which we have forced us to delineate and speak on the various aspects. Let me at the very outset say that the NGOs do have a checkered history all over the world. Finding so in the 18th century, by 1914, we had 183 NGOs in the world, non-state and non-government. But a lot of good work was done by that time in the area of universal suffrage or adult literacy or slavery, anti-slavery. So, in United Nations in 1905 gave them status, and in fact, in the session, the government observed it. We have various kinds of NGOs. Advocacy, some exactly go grassroots in society, working well in the sector of education, literacy, and grassroots programs. In fact, some of the NGOs, as I would, no, I'm sorry, my voice is not
sorry to
well because there is some problem with my Wi-Fi.
yes.
So can we start the speakers and then perhaps I can give my comments after it speaks?
Yeah, sir. In case if you want
Definitely,
to turn
sir.
camera,
Yeah.
then also we can hear you clearly, I hope.
Yeah. So please, first speaker is Mr. Saikrishna.
Saikrishna, sir, if you're there, please take over. I think sir is having some internet issue.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Mr.
Thank you,
Saikrishna.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. I'm here, sir. Yes. Sir, the topic itself is a highly interesting and very, very relevant topic. I would say that the structure of the topic, I mean, what is given to me is about FCRA, PMLA, and Income Tax Act, and the legal measures to ensure their accountability of the NGOs. Now, if you're looking at the whole context of civil society, the concept of civil society that we see, I think we also have a very glorious tradition of understanding this aspect very clearly. I am referring to the mentions that are made by the Chanakya and his Arthashastra about varieties of spice. In fact, he would brilliantly conceptualize this whole civil society concept as Janapada and how a king can monitor his Janapada and also monitor the Janapadas of his enemies using this series of spice. Now, if you look at the categories of spice, you would very interestingly observe a different type of spice like, a deceitful disciple, Kapati Kachatra, a recluse, a householder, a merchant, an ascetic practicing austerities, a classmate, a firebrand, a poisoner, and a mendicant woman. So the concept of using these type of roles to infiltrate into an enemy Janapada and create some sort of a trouble or a dissent or exploit and create vulnerability is something that has been seen and observed and documented very, very clearly by our ancestors through the brilliant books of, what is surviving currently is Arthashastra. I'm sure Arthashastra is also a representative of the long-standing tradition, which is documented only by. I would say that if you look at the influence operations that are being currently run across the world through use of non-profit organizations and non-governmental organizations, I would say that the current legal system that we have in India is the best that we can find in the world. But that being said, I would also beg to argue with the esteemed panelists and also with the listeners that this is a national security problem And our current approach by using the Income Tax Act or the PMLA or the FCRA is largely trying to contain the scope of this. And I think we require a comprehensive national security legislation, which would actually handle this challenge in a much more comprehensive way. Now, if you look at the Income Tax Act or the PMLA Act, they are both after the observation and commitment of the offences. Their role starts once an offence is committed. So that would create some sort of a delay or a lag in response. On the other hand, FCRA's focus is largely to keenly observe the activities of the NGOs. Now, if you look at the history of the violations that we have been observing in the implementation of the FCRA, you can clearly see that receipts of foreign contribution without registration or prior permission under FCRA happens constantly. Even today, most of the money comes to the bank, and the bank dispenses it. If the operator or if the company which is receiving the foreign funds can manage a bank personnel, it is very difficult for us to notice today. Before and it takes a lot of time to actually get out the money and then utilize the money for any operation that they would like to do. And second thing, most of the people don't maintain exclusive accounts for foreign contribution, and most of the NGOs which operate under the FCRA lose their registration largely because they do not file mandatory annual returns. So they can be, in a way considered as very similar to some sort of shell corporations and others. And the agencies, the NGOs themselves get taken over, or the bank account details, other details get changed. So these are the type of observations that the government of India has made over the implementation of FCRA and the loopholes in the implementation of FCRA over the last decade. So the approach that we currently seem to have, in legally speaking, to ensure the accountability of NGOs is to monitor them very closely using the FCRA. And I really don't think we still have a very foolproof system to ensure that you monitor the activities of the NGOs. And coming to its second part, once you find some anomalies in the FCRA, you move to the Income Tax Act and the PMLA Act to penalize them or to deprive them of their resources. I would still say this is not a proactive method in managing a very important gap in our national security thinking, which is basically non-profit organizations, which have been observed as a great vehicle for influence operations across the world. So this is slightly reactive, and I believe that a time has come where we should take a more proactive view. And I know that FCRA is again a reasonably mature act. It has been amended 2-3 times. And I think it has had a very good impact on the reduction of influx of unwanted foreign capital into India to do most of the influence operations. It has been very successful. But I still believe the right way to handle and ensure accountability is to build a national security legislation, which nowadays can be piloted by the National Security Council Secretariat itself. So that would be a greater alternative. And the rest of the causes, I think we can discuss over a period of queries. But I would also like to highlight 1 or 2 important aspects that we see. So these non-governmental organizations have been historically observed to be used, apart from the genuine cases, non-genuine cases I'm talking about, money laundering, terror financing, and also for running spy rings, and also for managing and funding political groups in India and the other dissident groups in India, which have an agenda that is convenient to many of the Western powers or the Eastern powers, whoever it is, any hostile powers. And we have also recently seen how the Chinese information operations have been unraveled in India. That also again happens through this. So I'm saying we can also create a better legal framework to enforce accountability by focusing on non-governmental organizations and their interactions, especially with media. Any expenditure that is spent on media, any expenditure that is spent on digital platforms, any expenditure that is spent on dealing with other political institutions or persons with political exposure, a special observation on that would again, remove the unwanted NGOs from operating within the country with the help of foreign countries, with the help of foreign agencies. On the other hand, this regulation would not affect the genuine NGOs which are working towards the causes of improvement and filling the gaps or running the last mile connectivity for the government. So that would be a couple of initial thoughts with which I thought we will have the conversation going. So if there are any specific questions, I think the chair can direct me to talk. So over to you, sir.
So are we having the questions now, Varghese, or later?
So So, in my opinion, I think we can just collect all the questions and have it at the end. So we can do as per your as per your wish, sir.
Okay. So thank you, Mr. Krishna, for your comment. You have argued for national security legislation, and you have said that we don't have a as far as the legal accountability for the NGOs, some of the NGOs who have a biased agenda. Well, the only thing we have to keep in mind, it's a democracy. Money laundering has been a very, very tough act already. But yes, certainly for the NGOs who are running their own agenda, there has to be more restrictions, and we may think of something like national security legislation. Thank you very much. Can I call upon now Dr. Anshuman Behera to speak about some of the NGOs who are politically motivated and who have a particular agenda of their own?
Thank you, sir. And am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, it has been a very learning experience since 11 o'clock. I've been listening to very important think leaders of India, and my previous speaker also highlighted some of the important issues. What I'll do is I've been asked to speak on the political movements of the NGOs and all that, and I'll also try to speak on this overused word of civil society in this present context. In that process, what I'll do is first, there is a very beautiful phrase that has been quoted in the concept note that the organizers shared with us. It actually talks about William Lynn's fourth generation warfare and what would be its nature and all that. And that's an important aspect that it actually catches is the legitimacy. So between the state and the society, here is a third kind of organization that comes and tries to operate with the pretext that it would save the individuals from the atrocities of the state. That is what we call the right-based kind of civil society. Then we have a set of civil societies that actually try to save the state from the over demands and the anarchic nature of the individuals. So these are the two types of civil societies that I, as a political science student, am very much familiar with. The civil societies that we are discussing today, it is not fair from my part to call them as civil societies. So I'll refrain from calling them as civil societies. What I'll call them as necessarily the disruptive and subversive organizations. I'll also not call them the NGOs, because the NGOs that I am familiar with, coming from a rural place in Odisha, they are no way, responsible for any kind of, anti-state, anti-nation, or anti-governmental kind of activities. They have challenged, those NGOs have challenged certain policies of the government, and rightfully so. I would subscribe those kind of things. So with this kind of in a conceptual background, let me tell you that the nature of these disruptive and subversive organizations, that we are loosely calling or we are giving too much of importance as civil society organizations, are not really changing. I am someone who has been following the Maoist organization and their kind of activities for last 2.5 decades. I'll tell you that this the disruptive and subversive nature of these organizations are nothing new. But what we are worried now, that the scope has been enlarged, the theater has actually shifted, or it has added from the jungles of India, where these Maoists and their front organizations used to operate, to the areas where we have the urban kind of congregations. So then, and this subversive and disruptive organizations, what they do, they look for platforms where they legitimize three important things. One, their existence. Their existence as an organization, they look for platforms. I'll come to the platforms. How do they actually get into a particular platform? And then they actually also try to legitimize their operation. And in this process, they try to further their objectives. Okay. So, and in all these three aspects, what is the legitimacy or the aspect of legitimacy becomes very, very important. I'll tell you, how the narrative of legitimizing these actions of disruption and subversion is actually carried out. You would remember, it's a truly a privilege. I've been listening to Mr. Yashovardhan Azad TV debates, and it is a privilege when he's sharing the session. I will not try to lecture in his presence, but he would correct me that that in 1960s and late 60s and 70s, what we actually witnessed, that there was a romanticization of violent revolution, what we say. Okay, there is a romanticization of violent revolution, that the so-called educated people, they come and they join in the name of like eliminating the class enemy. Okay, let's not get into that. So what we are, getting or are observing now, that this romanticization of disruption and subvertive kind of activities are seen on the roads, are seen on the streets, whether it is in the university setups in the US, what we are seeing now, and in the United Kingdom, to some of the university setups in India, where disruption, subversion, necessarily against a government, necessarily against the state, are actually romanticized, and that defines the very existence of an individual. That is one. And what is more worse, what is more worrisome, is that also defines that a lot of people have internalized. Unless you speak this language, you will not be that kind of recognized as a kind of celebrity scholar. To that extent, we are seeing that the scope of this kind of disruptive and subvertive activities are actually expanding, and it is scatters to the objective of certain organizations. At the same time, the people who are struggling with their individual identity, contested identity, they also try to take refuge there. Let me come to the second aspect of it. How does it move? How does it actually operate? Now, there was something called the Tactical United Front of the Maoist. What do they do? The people who are not really Maoist, but have some kind of sympathy for the causes of the downtrodden, people who are marginalized, the Maoists will try to establish a connection. They would call for a kind of a bandh, they call for a strike in certain areas. You will not find the Maoists actually protesting on the road. You will not find the Maoists actually raising slogans. But these people will be raising slogans against the government, against the state, and the purpose of the Maoists are actually served. So in that case, what happens, what we call the oil split joints, the splits everywhere, they come together and they can kind of, serve to the objectives of the Maoist, to create a disruption, to create a kind of subversion, to create some kind of panic in the minds of the people. Here is a farmer's agitation that is an example in our what we have seen, and the Delhi riot of 2020. So what, the farmers have all the right to come and protest against a particular policy framework of a government. There is no contestation, there is no disagreement over that. But the very nature of the kind of protest and the involvement of certain disruptive organizations, what is the role of somebody somebody called Sarjil Imam coming onto the stage and talking about what he said about questioning or creating kind of a kind of disruption of India's territorial integrity or territorial kind of unity. So that is where what happens. It actually solves two purposes. One, the entire social movement, socio-political movement with a genuine cause is completely kind of delegitimized by these people. Second, they also legitimize their stance. Somehow they kind of recruit their people from there. So Dr. Suresh Prabhakar Prabhu was actually mentioning two important things. One is who will decide the bad and the good NGOs, So one way of looking at it, let's not call these kind of organizations as NGOs or civil society organizations. We'll have to have this kind of terminology, disruptive and subversive kind of an organization. And who will do that? That is the role of the state and the society becomes very, very important here. I'll come to that. So then, and Ambassador, Kanwal Siwal very, beautifully actually brought out this concept of wokeism, where the highest form of individual identity crisis when it actually seeks a refuge under a kind of umbrella organization that necessarily says, okay, anti-state, anti-government kind of things. There is a third element that actually works in a very subtle form. These elements are very much there. If I can borrow, I hate to borrow from him, but there is something that I like to borrow from Mao. These are called the comprador class. The comprador class is one that actually pretends to be with the mass, but has an aspiration to become an elite. So I am actually hinting at the so-called think leaders and the so-called assistant professors and the professors in the university setup. And most of the convols are actually took the name of CPR. So there are so many think tanks, so-called think tanks actually are there. And this is where this third element actually operates. And these third elements gives kind of cover fire to the elements that I discussed actually on the street, those who are actually working. So the objective of this kind of an academic research is now substituted by making opinions. You will see there are internet is a multi-edged kind of sword. The social media is a kind of a multi-edged kind of sword. It gives platform unregulated most of the time to all sorts of kind of people, and that is where you see what we used to call as academic backed by evidence, backed by objectivity, a lot of systematic study of knowledge, that used to be the academic. Now we are also seeing in the university setups. I myself a kind of professor, I'm teaching in one of the good research organizations in India. What we are now increasingly seeing, starting from college to the students, that there is an articulated, organized kind of opinion, and these opinions are articulated in such a vocabulary that necessarily puts a particular country, a particular government, in a bad light. So the state as a necessary evil, and this has been actually taken in its letter and spirit by these people, and they see that anything that is actually necessarily bad, this is a handiwork of the state or the state machinery. So what is the way out? And I travel, Rami is there, and she will be speaking about the Northeast. And last year, this Kuki and Meitei conflict actually started. I wrote a piece. People who are interested can actually go back. The bigger book is coming on that. On Manipur, I was traveling in Manipur and Mizoram that particular time, and I extensively I was traveling from there. This is a conflict between two ethnic groups. There is absolutely no reason for the intellectual or the so-called intellectual sitting in Delhi, Bombay, those who even do not know how to spell these ethnic groups out. They do not know what is their socio-cultural, political kind of base. They have actually attributed so much kind of things, creating a kind of a narrative that this is between the two religious kind of group. If that was between the Hindus and the Christians, why the Nagas are silent? If it was between the two religious groups, the conflict was between two religious groups, why at all the Kukis and the Nagas fought in 2000? In 2018 and 2020. If it is only about the religious kind of conflict, then why did both the Kukis, the Thados and the Paitais actually fight? So we have become the reactionary scholars, since we have the kind of larger responsibility in terms of creating a kind of forging a consensus. That is what the politics, the political movements that we have actually given the title. What is so political about it? The political here is all about creating kind of disagreements, creating kind of conflicts, creating kind of subversions. The politics has a larger kind of an objective. Lot of the political scientists and the people who study the political science often forget that the politics also actually manages the disagreement and forges consensus. Why our vocabulary of our writings, academic writings, cannot be in terms of resolving, in terms of kind of forging a consensus? Why can't we actually look for a scope where cookies and Meiteis can come and have a dialogue together? We are not doing that, or most of us, we are not doing that. What we are doing is we are looking for the divergence points between the cookies and the Nagas and the Meiteis, right? So what needs to be done? What is the way out? The way out may sound what I say or what the governments are rightfully doing in many nation states. Most of the time are branded or attributed as undemocratic. And people have this kind of, and democracy, if there is a larger consensus, this is one of the most misused, abused, overused kind of terminology. Anything can be actually packaged into democracy. But in democracy, if you can take a kind of consensual kind of understanding, democracy which actually supports and creates a fraternal feeling among the individual, between the individuals and the individuals, and between the individual and the community and the social, that is where we can actually talk about that there has to be some regulation. There has to be some kind of surveillance on these kind of activities. One of these, there has to be that any activity by any of these kind of organizations that goes against the political and the social ethos of a particular country needs to be regulated and needs to be identified. There is no need, and most of the time, this goes out of the proportion. Okay, sedition charges and all those things are slapped. I do not know. That is a different debate to have. But we can actually identify these people, and there has to be a mechanism where the government or the state machinery can call them and have a dialogue. Why are you doing this? And such kind of things are, and you are being actually, you are under surveillance, and we are marking you, we are observing you. No such thing has been done. People who raise the slogan, tukde tukde kind of thing in the Indian Institute of Science here, I can tell you, are part of our climate change kind of negotiation. So if that is the thing, the government has failed, to identify the people, and the YouTube videos are available, and I can draw your attention. Those of you know, I can send you. So these are the people, when they go to negotiate our national interest, God knows what they are negotiating in the international platform, because here within India, they are actually raising slogans that are necessarily anti-Indian in nature. Those are anti-people in nature. Okay. Second thing, there has to be a very, very robust mechanism to create counter narrative in the social media. And I'm talking about that the social media is actually, creating all sorts of kind of problems. Why are we not able to kind of, create this kind of counter narratives? And these counter narratives has to be done by the duty-based civil societies. And the duty-based civil society also needs to function within a boundary. It cannot be a vigilante group. Okay, it can be a group that can actually educate the people without creating or without resorting to any aggressive, any extremist kind of activities. The moment you get into those kind of an extremist and very aggressive kind of an activity, and this is where the subversive and disruptive kind of an organizations will actually legitimize their kind of a stand again. And the last point I will say that there is a need to also keep a check on the people who write and people who think that, or people who claim to be intellectuals. If these people are, because they are the ones, as Ambassador Kanwal Sibal was very rightly saying, the liberal art kind of department, once it comes and establishes their kind of shops, I would say, in India, because they are coming here for profit making, but they are not coming here imparting education. Once they establish their shops here, who will regulate their syllabus? We have seen, I recently delivered a talk in one of the, foreign university that has a base in Hyderabad. And I was talking about fraternity. I said that when the West has actually or engages more on equality and liberty, the very understanding, very background and the base of Indian thinking has been the fraternity. That is where I was quoting from Gandhi to Ambedkar to Kautilya to many people. Okay, how there is the social and the fraternal feeling among the individual and the social is very important. That was not appreciated by the think tank there, because the too much of individual celebration, too much of individual right without any duty is a very dangerous thing. And these are the people who will get kind of, or find a refuge in this subversive and disruptive kind of organizations. I stop here. Okay, I would, any comments, any suggestions, any corrections, I would love to take them. Thank you very much.
Sir, you're there, Yashovardhan, sir? Sir, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Behera. I think you have raised some of the most critical issues in your address. The first being the Maoist issue and their overground organizations. From experience, I can say that the Maoist depredations on the Red Corridor have been something which the country can never forget. And you're absolutely right. In the 60s and 70s, and 70s actually, when we were in college, there was this era of romanticism associated with the youngsters who would leave colleges and go and join this Charu Mazumdar gang, etc. But over time, of course, a lot of it, they were lured away by the kind of things which are happening there. And Andhra was one of the first states to smash Maoism completely. And when it shifted to the upper echelons and landed up in Chhattisgarh, which was my cadre along with Madhya Pradesh. See, the issue is that an organization, a subversive organization or a militant organization like Maoists, who don't believe in democracy, who don't believe in governance, I don't know how their overground organizations can, or their NGOs can ever justify any kind of activities on their part. But I do know, when you are referring to the Comprador class, that I went to a university to address, there were the students who were absolutely on fire and speaking about police encounters and other things. And I explained to them that when we have NGOs who are fighting for the tribal rights, who are fighting for their compensation, they are certainly doing the right thing. But any kind of violence cannot be tolerated. And your last point, when you talked about a mature response, I totally agree with you. It should not be a kind of a vigilante response. And the point you mentioned about Manipur is absolutely right. It's don't term it religious. It's a question of a political, social. It has a history, and I think in that context, we'll be really keen to hear Dr. Rami just now on the issue of the ethnic violence, on the role of the church, and securing the Northeast. Yes, Mrs. Rami Desai.
You're mute, Rami.
Thank you very much, sir, and namaskar. It's really a privilege for me to be here amongst all of you and to have heard such an array of fine intellectuals and thought leaders. Obviously, the topic that has been given to me is the Northeast, and I always say this right at the outset, which I'm going to say today also, is that the reason I even attempt speaking about the Northeast is I do have 17 years of field experience. I usually say over a decade, but I just counted it the other day and it's a lot more. But the reason I am compelled to say this, and I'll take a point of what my very highly esteemed colleague, Dr. Behera, said, is that, everybody thinks that they understand complex areas nowadays, I have never claimed to be an expert. I never will be, because every time I go there, I learn 2 more things and come back. But however, let me counter this as well. I think this sort of alienating yourselves by saying, oh, others can't comment on us, because you're not from here, itself is creating an insider-outsider perspective, is immediately creating a divide. This is not just a unique problem to the Northeast, but this is a problem anywhere across the world, especially today in the kind of communication that we have. Even 20 years ago when Godhra happened, I was studying in England at that time, and the kind of miscommunication that had happened, there was a complete one-sided narrative, and one-sided had been washed off. But, unfortunately, you can't tell people that, you can't comment on us. People will comment, and, sometimes they'll comment for reasons that are not true to the scholarship. And more often than not, we are seeing that even in the case of the Northeast and the recent unfortunate Manipur conflict. I have seen that, personally, wherein I've spoken about it, and I've obviously commented on it and written on it. And I've seen that the way we are consuming information has completely changed. We are no longer, 20 years ago, we used to sit in libraries and we used to read long form, and we used to go through books and go off on another tangent, because we didn't know where to look for the information that we were looking for. That is not the case any longer. We want to read a 5-line Instagram post, or we want to get carried away on Twitter and make everything a political issue. This is the problem of the social sciences today. And I think this is particularly a problem of India, because we've never taken the social sciences very seriously. We feel that anybody from any, engineer can write something on a social sciences theme, I don't know, a physicist can comment on it. No, what happens with this? And I say this as a poor student of the social sciences, that nobody ever listens to us, is the fact that, you don't know the frameworks. If you don't know the frameworks, you are not being able to look at a situation through the right lenses. Now, the reason that the West has an edge on this is because they created the social sciences. Anthropology was created by the colonialists to come and study other societies. Sociology, we still study, largely the Western sociologists. Not many people I hear quoting about G.S. Ghurye on tribal matters, or Radha Kamal Mukherjee, or the great nationalist sociologists, because we are studying essentially subjects that are not our own. And this is one of the problems with the Northeast. When the ICS officers came from England and were deployed to the Northeast, the fact of the matter was that they were all students of anthropology, because that was one of the subjects that they had to study for their civil service examinations. So a lot of the material that we read are from the eyes of Western observers, rooted in Christian morality. So when they appeared on the scene in the Northeast, let's say this was the Battle of Plassey and so on and so forth, they were looking at the tribal communities that they encountered as barbarians, savages, and pagans. These are words that we find over and over again used in the autobiographies they wrote, the diaries of and the books that they wrote. And this is how they encountered them, and they felt that this was really important to sort of contest, because after all, they're wanting for morality. Because the minute you say somebody is pagan or somebody is barbarian, you want to impart morality. Now, which is fine, I mean, I think conversion is personal as long as it's not infringing on anybody's human rights. It doesn't use coercive methods. And, possibly right at the beginning, that was really how the situation was. But over a period of time, the churches took on a political role as well. They started interfering in, and this is, of course, let me not say that this is all churches, because it isn't. There were vested interests wherein they started taking on a political role, supporting secessionist movements, and this is all there in history. I remember reading, and I've often quoted this, reading a letter, correspondence from the political agent, one of the political agents in the Northeast, writing to the Secretary of the government in England and saying that, look, we've just encountered these people and they're at a nascent stage of nationhood. If we can impart our morality, through the Christian lens, we would be able to convert them quicker and faster, and that would be opposite to, and that's the reason that we should really engage with these tribal communities, because we are not getting a lot of success amongst the upper middle classes in the rest of the country, because that's what they were there for. Now, eventually this transformed into a separate identity. And let me tell you this, it didn't happen pre-independence. Pre-independence, if you look at the rate of conversions in most of the states, were very, very low. I think even till the 1970s in Arunachal Pradesh was only about, if I'm not mistaken, about 0.7% or something like that. This is in the 70s. Today they say it's 40%. On the ground, people say it's 60%. Now, this is the question here. One has to realize why this happens in terms of if somebody needed to convert me, it would have to be a spiritual experience. That is what would make it legitimate for me to convert, that I've had a spiritual awakening or something that I haven't seen otherwise. This obviously wasn't the case. A lot of it, and I've done some studies on this. May I just request people to put their yeah. I've compared some records of when NSCN picked up speed in the 1980s when they split into IM and K. The rate of conversion also went up. And there have been ample amount of accusations as well as evidence of a lot of this sort of interference wherein there have been forced conversions and so on and so forth. Tripura also, I remember traveling there many, many years ago. And at that time, NLFT was really, really active. There was sound evidence that was found between some of the pastors and NLFT. Now, this is generally the greater scenario, and this becomes, and as the topic that is given to me is the question of security in the Northeast. Now, the reason I mentioned this is, again, let me be very clear, because, today's day and age, we are also hypersensitive. Let me be clear, I'm not attacking a religion. I'm not attacking, the church. What I'm saying is that there has been this role by vested interests within religious denominations. And we have seen that with the rise of NSCN. We've seen that with NLFT. We've seen that with multiple smaller groups. Eventually, what was the slogan of NSCN-IM? Was Nagaland for Christ. We know that, there was, the plan was for a separate state that was based on religion. Now that happening on our borders makes it, puts us in a precarious position. And I think that is something that we have been aware of for a while, but we've also been limited because of our previous government policies from really addressing these issues. There have been, if Jawaharlal Nehru's, our former Prime Minister's tribal affairs advisor was a missionary, but very irrelevant, then obviously we know the kind of policies of excluded, included areas or ILPs, which were sustained, even though major sociologists like G.S. Ghurye were saying that, this would create divisions within society. On the contrary, we need to, include them in the national development so that they don't get left behind in the sense of nationhood, and they don't get left behind in development initiatives. However, in this sort of fraudulent, and I say this without, any holds bar, this sort of fraudulent incentives to keep tribal communities unique. I mean, they can do that for themselves. They know exactly what to do. Who are we to decide from the outside that they cannot take decisions of their own and therefore they should be barred within geographical areas? But that is what was done. Now, I don't have much time, and this is a really big topic. There are so many facets to it. So, if I jump to the present day situation, this is what's happened. This prolonged sort of identity crisis, this prolonged ignoring of the Northeast, even if you look at how it's geographically put together, with a 22-kilometer chicken's neck that leads up to the Northeast. And for multiple years, even when I was going there, there used to be one flight to Guwahati, and then you had to jump and, either go by road or, take some very expensive flights, The kind of connectivity issues that we had, the Northeast was not in our mainstream imagination. It is only in the last 10 years, and this is why, I really think that this dispensation has done a good job with the Northeast, because, they put it, the focus of their foreign policy. They have created the Act Peace policy, which was really active till the situation in Myanmar, worsened, and then the Manipur conflict happened, but the kind of incentives that have been taken for connectivity has been fairly important. And I think, that has brought the Northeastern region to our mainstream consciousness. But we must remember that exploitation within communities still remains. So wherein the Meitei-Kuki conflict was neither of the fault of either of the two communities. If both were to blame, then both were victims as well. But you would see in both communities groups of vested parties going to international platforms, making it about a religious issue, simplifying it to such an extent. This idea of constantly going to the Western powers to interfere with your internal, problems is something that defies logic, because neither do they have any jurisdiction, nor do they have any understanding of these areas. If at the most, this is going to complicate things more. But the West is obsessed. It's not just obsessed with India, but it's always obsessed with the Northeast, and it always has been. Even when the British were leaving, there was this idea of a crown colony that they wanted to leave the Northeast as a crown colony, where they had some amount of direct influence on it, So at the end of the day, this is, the Northeast does have this sort of connectivity and, this sort of interest in the West, and the West has this interest in the Northeast. So, this has become problematic now, even in the Manipur conflict. And Dr. Behera, right before this, has said that, he traveled these areas also. I traveled these areas as well, and I went well into these areas. I went into the hill areas, and I found people far more receptive, far more understanding of the situation, then I find people on social media and so-called lobbyists of these communities, and this is very problematic, because people are being used as fodder on ground. Wherein other people who consider them representatives of the communities are sitting in their safe havens and making commentary. So we have a larger problem than we can deal with. But, like I said, the topic that was given to me was ethnic conflict, church and civil society. I think there are some great stakeholders, as there are in every community. And I think, nationalism and nation building is over and above anything else that we intend to do. And I don't think we can do that without the Northeast, because that is, after all, our Northeastern frontier. If we want our foreign policy, the Act Peace policy, to be really representative of what it envisions itself to be, then it cannot be done without the Northeast, And I really do feel that we need to engage these stakeholders who are willing to rise above ethnic differences, communal differences, religious differences, and involve them in raising their voices against what is deemed, today anti-national, voices against, ethnic communal clashes being internationalized, and to help larger communities see the bigger picture. Now, the bigger picture, and this would be my last part of this, because I think there is David, who's highly enthusiastically commenting. So I would rather take some questions and maybe engage in a conversation. But, it is important for us to really look at our ACTI's policy as a balancing power. I understand Myanmar is in a difficult situation at this point. It is in a state of ethnic violence. You have multiple ethnic armed organizations, you have the junta. But let me also remind you, where there's a problem, there is a solution. It's only 5 days ago that the Chinese set records by, getting the EOs on board and the junta on board and coming to an agreement that their assets in Myanmar will be protected. Therefore, the work on the Shabshu port has started 5 days ago. 500 Chinese have arrived. The Arakan army has given them a go-ahead. India has the Kaladan multimodal project, which is hugely important for us. It's a difficult project to achieve because, it's multimodal and the areas that it goes through are difficult areas in Myanmar. But having said that, that is an important project for us because it gives us an alternative route to the Siliguri corridor. We also have the Asian Trilateral Highway. So I think the government's really on the right track right now. The NSA, our NSA met the Myanmar NSA in Russia. There are multi-level dialogues that are going on. So therefore, I do feel that irrespective of what their internal problems are, with some amount of concerted effort, our assets can also be protected. But our assets being protected doesn't have any meaning unless our borders are secure. The Northeast is in a state of peace as it was in the last 6 years. There is some sort of mutual understanding that comes between these two communities, and that more becomes accessible again. To this end, I will reiterate this, and I have said this before, that I find it is hugely important for our border areas to be multicultural, not, or maybe have special economic zones that gives incentive to other communities and, a mixed bag of people to be settled here, so that, there aren't any sort of vested interest like we saw in NSC and, this sort of transnational ethnic sort of nationalism, that comes across. And it doesn't come across just because, it is innocent. It comes because there are grander, more geopolitical designs to this. So therefore, this has become, the Northeast region has become very important also in the context that the Northwest is now what they used to call the Great Game West, which is done and over with. The land routes for us are blocked. We have the northeastern frontier, which is the other frontier, that, as leads to South Asia, Southeast Asia. But, today it is called the New Great Game East, because what was played in the western frontier is today being played on the northeastern frontier. I will stop at that with just reasserting the fact that the Northeast is possibly for us the most important frontier that we have, and we must secure it, and we must bring in all groups that have an understanding of nation building and nationalism in engagement. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rami Desai. Thank you for pointing out the geographical and the socio-economic importance of the Northeast, and especially in the context of Manipur, and also the role of the church. Let me remind the participants that the Society of Registration Act was first, formulated in the year 1860 during the British times, and some of the first NGOs who came here were the missionaries. And the churches, when they were established, their role in the tribal societies came under scrutiny. Of course, they did a lot of good work in providing education and healthcare, but proselytization was also on the agenda. Absolutely. So this is something which has been there, and what Dr. Rami Desai was talking about, the role of the church in the Northeast was to a large extent also replicated in the tribal belt, right from Odisha to Bihar to Jharkhand to even Chhattisgarh. Now, as purely as a security professional, let me say that Manipur, and I've been there many, many times, I have my colleagues and friends, and also colleagues who are, investigating the various cases, which were so many FIRs lodged there, that it is still on the boil. It is a very, very tough call. It actually calls for political sagacity. It calls for a political kind of a mediation, somebody of the stature and caliber who's acceptable to both the parties. And yes, there are very, very serious issues on both sides. There's a great divide. And I would also say, with reference to Myanmar, very rightly pointed out by Dr. Rami Desai, how the Chinese have been able to strike a deal both on both sides with the Janta and the people who are opposing them. I would say that even our fencing project, which hasn't started, and officially it was said that it's not there. Thank God it's not been there, because there are a lot of implications. And Manipur would certainly need a much, much deeper look. And in fact, as Dr. Rami Desai said, Northeast itself would require a different, a more deeper kind of study and engagement. Now, the last speaker we have is Dr. Pandya. Dr. Pandya will be talking, Abhinav Pandya will be talking about charity organizations, Zakat, and the terror. Yes, Dr. Pandya, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Azad, and also my thanks to Indic Researchers Forum for inviting me. First of all, let me begin with this. Terror funding is the term which we use, but for the other side, and let me put it very bluntly, in the mainstream Islamic discourse, this is not terror funding. I think I've been given the topic of Zakat, charities. Zakat is one of the 5 essential pillars of Islam. Let me give you one example. When Ahmad Shah Abdali was invading India, money was collected from various parts of the countries. People approached the Muslim community, the common ordinary lay followers, saying that, well, if you don't donate, your religion is in danger and you're going to be completely destroyed, suppressed. So this fellow has to come from Afghanistan to salvage you from this Maratha, the Hindu Padshah, and this entire notion of Hindu revival. So Zakat has been the essential part of this Islamic discourse. And this is like you contribute money for a religious purpose. But then how do you differentiate whether it goes to the right purpose or the wrong purpose? That's first question. Then let me give you some factual details. Charities. Charities are like an extended form of Zakat. When you want to institutionalize, when you want to put Zakat into the right channels, when you want a proper systematic arrangement to use Zakat funds, then you create charities. That's why you come across several charities, the Islamic charities in the Islamic world, as well as where they are now. Like in Kashmir, if you go in every petty small town city, you will come across hundreds of charities, whether they are doing educational work or some running orphanages, etc., whatever. In Arab world, you have umpteen number of charities. There were big charities, Al Haramin Foundation, etc., which was found to be supplying money to Lashkar-e-Taiba and also linked to various other terror groups like Al Qaeda. In Kashmir, Jamaat-e-Islami is an organization which runs like a perfect legal entity, and that runs orphanages, schools, colleges, and it's perfect until it was banned recently in 2019. Before that, it was running as a perfectly charity organization, and it was funding all sorts of terrorist organizations. There was no single killing in Kashmir which went without Jamaat sanction. That's what they used to say. It was known as the sword arm of Hizbul Mujahideen. Now, let me give you some examples from the foreign countries. In US, since 2007, federal government agencies have disbursed $47 million to Islamic organizations. An overwhelming majority of these organizations, they are related to radical, extremist influence, and they are engaged to they are related to radical Islamic organizations. Since 2013, Jamaat-linked organizations in US, they've received $2 million funding from the US government. So there's this network of charities. Maulana Masood Azhar, when he went to South Africa and to London to collect money, he collected money from ordinary people, ordinary followers. They were businessmen. They were people like, who had Indian origin, who had Pakistani origin, and they were doing some regular business, like trade in shawls, trade in fruits, and they donated money. When Masood Azhar went to London, he gave a speech in 40 different mosques in London. And ordinary people donated money, and he collected huge amounts of money. Exact figures are mentioned in the interrogation report of IB, interrogation report of JKP. You'll find all those figures, but they're not publicly accessible. But those figures are clearly mentioned. So now my question is that, well, these factual details, I can go on. And if you're really more interested in factual details and are also interested in knowing the spread of these charities and the network of Jamaat, I recommend you my book, which has just come out, Terror Financing in Kashmir. And Routledge, Taylor and Francis has published this book. So this gives you all the details of the terror financing in Kashmir. Now, in my lecture, I'm going to address some very fundamental questions. I guess first we need to understand what is jihad. Jihad, it has to be understood very objectively. I see that there is a tendency among Indian scholars mostly, whenever they speak about Islamism or Islamic extremism, first they apologize. Sorry, I'm not hurting a religion. Sorry, I'm not doing that. Okay, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to talk as a very objective scholar, one who believes in evidence and very hard evidence. For me, the idea of jihad is an excellent war doctrine. It can be compared to something like what Sun Tzu is in China. He gives a good war doctrine. So this is also an excellent war doctrine in Islam. The reason is that Islam is one of the Abrahamic faiths, and it is in many ways it's quite different from the other two also, because there is a very strong emphasis on proselytization and different methods of proselytization. So jihad is a very comprehensive doctrine. It is not just about going and fighting a battle like a soldier with your weapons and arms. There's a concept called tahziz al-ghazi, which means that if you cannot take up a weapon and go to the battle and start fighting with enemies, no problem. You start contributing in any which way you can. You can give money, you can serve the jihadis, you can render sexual services for the jihadis, whatever way. Which it's a religious concept. I'm not concocting stories here to please any political party. It's a proper religious concept, Tahziz al-Ghazi. I have discussed about this concept in detail in one of my papers, which I wrote for Vivekananda Foundation, and my co-author in that paper was Mr. C.D. Saha, former chief of RDW. I've written about this concept. So jihad is a very comprehensive idea. When you say that it's a comprehensive idea, and you have ample number of opportunities to fight the war for Allah, for Islam, then bring in all sorts of things. You can do jihad through media, you can do jihad through academia, you can do jihad through charities. An example of this was seen in a very fine manner in Kashmir. In Kashmir, over the last 30 years, and I'll also explain why it came. The whole network of separatist media came up in Kashmir. All these Greater Kashmir and Kashmir Reader and different, media portals. What they were doing, they were promoting and peddling separatist and Islamic extremist narrative. They wouldn't call Jammu-Srinagar highway as a national highway. They wouldn't call terrorist as a terrorist. When a terrorist would kill someone, they would call it unknown gunman killed. Like that. Many examples. I have again, discussed about them in my book. Then you have intellectuals who are very apologetic. You'll come across many intellectuals who will say that, no, there's no problem in Islam. Political Islam is a problem. But you go to a cleric. I have interviewed several real-time militants of Lashkar and also the clerics of Ahle Hadith. They have a very different story. They would say, well, you are idiots, like you're differentiating between political Islam and Islam. There is no such differentiation. Politics is an essential part of our scriptural, scripture edifice. There is no Islam without politics. So people, the intellectuals who are coming from big places like Harvard, Columbia, even in India, they are a big level of intellectuals. They will try to create these stories. They will try to create these narratives, which are very befuddling, very confusing, and they perplex you. No, this is not a problem. Barelvi is, Ahle Hadith is a problem. Barelvi is not a problem. There's no problem with Shias. This is the problem. Devbandi is a problem. But people who don't understand these fine differences, they always, fall prey to these narratives. The best example of the people who were massively fooled by these elements, they are our intelligence agencies. Our intelligence agencies, they would run, or they would raise Devbandi. No, to counter the Salafis who are coming from Saudi Arabia, we have to prop up Devbandis. In Kashmir, okay, terrorism is a problem. Let's bring Devbandis from UP. Okay. They would become another bigger problem. Jaish-e-Mohammed, which is one of the most lethal terrorist organizations that believes in Devbandi. Now another story comes up. No, sir, Pakistan Devband is different from the Indian Devband. Ask them a question. Do you differ on the fundamental issues or not? When Masood Azhar came to India, he first visited Saharanpur Devband Madrasa. Then he visited, this Babri Masjid. Outside Babri Masjid, he was crying. He was in tears. He also met that Nadwi, from the Firangi man in Lucknow Madrasa. So these are the issues. Just a moment. Let me. Yes. So the point what I want to make is that these institutions like Zakat is a very religious institution, and the organizations, the charity organizations, they are pretty much a part of this overall entire global system to fund. We call it terror, but definitely it's not just terror. It's for a large part of the people who are subscribing to that ideology, it's a mainstream religious activity. Okay. Now, my simple question is that, okay, when we talk about taking countermeasure, you have thousands of madrasas running in South Punjab, the places around Bahawalpur and all those areas, thousands of madrasas. Common people send their kids to these madrasas, and they're given all kinds of extremist teaching. Okay. Some part of those students, a small number of them, they end up joining terrorist organizations like Lashkar and Jaish. And another segment of those students, they come and join the mainstream education institutions. How do you differentiate? Likewise, in Kashmir, Jamaat-e-Islami is running schools and colleges. They have good infrastructure. What they did in 1990 was that they destroyed all the government schools, which were so-called moderately secular. After that, they created their own schools and colleges, Jamaat-e-Islami. They got all the funding from Pakistan, and they also raised funding from the local sources also. People were donating. So from those schools and colleges, there'll be a good number of people who'll go and join militant organizations like Lashkar, Jaish, and Hizbul Mujahideen. But there will also be people, they will come out and they will start writing civil services examination. And you will see them as your IPS officers, as your IS officers, as your the state civil service officers, as your judicial magistrates in Jammu and Kashmir, and in several other parts of the country. How do you differentiate? That's the problem. Another problem coming to the solutions, this is a very, very big and a wide topic. So I'm just touching a few points only here and there because, I don't know where to start and where to end. Problem is that now let's think about the part of the solution. Okay, you have an organization like PFI. PFI is, they have a political outfit. They have a school. They have an outfit for the school and college student. In a democratic setup, how do you ban them? What evidences do you have? Can you stop someone from saying that, well, we will not spread our religion? Can you do that? You can't do that. You need an excellent infrastructure in terms of intelligence, and our intelligence agencies, they are mostly run by IPS babus. The problem is that the police chaps who are serving in the state, like as the district SP of some district, or let's say DIG, they have a completely different mandate. They are organizing elections, they are catching thieves, they are catching, in Rajasthan we call it nakbajni or something, like local different kinds of crimes. That's not an intelligence work. In any part of the world, I've been to US, I've seen the Russian system, the intelligence recruitment is entirely different. Most of the police chaps that I have interacted, I find this strategic vision absolutely lacking. In Kashmir, I can give you examples. When Jamaat-e-Islami was banned, so I interviewed a couple of state police service officers. One fellow comes to me, and I was preparing a report to Jamaat-e-Islami because I was also assisting the then governor of Jammu and Kashmir on issues like radicalization and security. I was preparing a report on Jamaat-e-Islami. So I invited this officer, he was an SP rank officer, for some interview. I asked him what was the role of Jamaat in 2016 agitation. He said, Janab, Jamaat बहुत मासूम और बहुत ही कहते हैं ना एक innocent organization है. आप उनके बारे में ऐसी बात कैसे कर सकते हैं? They're very innocent, very nice people. They are running schools, they are running colleges. And he was a very highly decorated officer from the state cadre, promoted to IPS. No? Then I had my own doubts, because in my research, I try to cross-verify. I came to know that that fellow was following an Ahle Hadith branch of Islam. So he was very strongly connected with Jamaat. He had studied in their schools and he had studied in their colleges. But in the report, it came out that Jamaat was the main organization that was behind the 2016 post-Burhan Wani agitation in Kashmir. The entire Kashmir went up in flames. There were officers, young officers, with the experience of 10 to 12 years of serving in IPS, who cleared this IS examination. They were serving in the state as DIGs. When Jamaat was banned, they approached me and they said that, sir, this is really wrong. Why did you ban this organization? They are nice people. I said, why? So they are running schools and colleges, and whenever we have an agitation, they help us. So what Jamaat did actually, it was a very different kind of a game. They propped up the agitation. They would fund those stone pelters because they got all that money from the separatists in different channels. Then they created the agitation. After that, int agencies won't come to them, or even the police would go to them. Sir, please help, help us control this agitation. Then they would dictate those terms. Okay, fine, we can manage your agitation. Okay, but we want this, we want these minor concessions. Finally, they would tell those coordinators, please stop it. Then they'll go back. And the police chaps who were the senior bureaucrat, they would feel that, no, these are really great guys, great Maulvis who are helping us stop the agitation. So that's a problem. You need to completely revamp your intelligence structures. And also see, besides that, there are major changes even at the constitutional level. But, again, I don't want to go into those details, but I must say that this is something where the lines are very blurred. In Udaipur, after that Nupur Sharma episode, Kanhaiya Kumar was killed. He was brutally murdered in an ISIS style. What do you think? That incident happened in a day or two? No, it didn't. Later, it was found that those two chaps, who were masquerading as the activists and the party cadres of BJP, and they were pretty much the part of the mainstream society. They could be seen in different social functions, but they brutally murdered that chap Kanhaiya Kumar, who I think wrote some posts supporting Nupur Sharma. And later it was found that there was a complete nexus here. People were visiting Pakistan via Nepal for last 10 years. And that fellow, he went to complain the local police chiefs, and the fellow said that, well, what is this, blasphemy, all that, we don't understand. Please get out. Okay, I'm a senior officer. You can't see me. I don't have time for that. I met some of the IOs after that. They said that, well, we were completely shocked. What is this terminology? What is Ahle Hadith? What is Barelvi? What is Deobandi? What is Allah Wale? What is Labbak? Senior officers, can you imagine? Officers of the rank of IGP, they had completely zero clue about it. So I think we need a different setup. Okay? And regarding the Societies of Registration Act, well, I must say, that some of these organizations, they are always a step ahead of us. So even if we bring these FCRA regulations and all, they are simply going to hurt the genuine ones, genuine NGOs. Because these organizations, as Osama bin Laden rightly said, well, I know the international financial system just like the palm of my hand. You go one step ahead, we go 100 steps backward. They resort to Hawala. And Hawala network is very deep. You need an excellent, very fine, robust intelligence network for that. First of all, we don't have those capabilities. We don't have that infrastructure. In the state service, in most of the states of India, if you go, there's this department called CID zone. That's considered as a punishment posting. Either the officers who are not able to please their masters, they are posted to those departments, or the people who are incompetent, they are sent to those departments. So we don't have that infrastructure. The job is not respected. You need to revamp it. Now coming to the counter narrative. Okay. So yes, I was giving an example of this societies of registration. So even if you bring FCRA regulations, do you think that this will control all these this Islamist charities, NGOs? To an extent, but not, it won't help much because they'll get money through Hawala. There are various other networks. I'll give you one simple example. Suppose, what if, see, you get illegal Rohingya refugees in Bengal and give them some papers and all their legal details. After that, you open their Jan Dhan accounts, and in their Jan Dhan account, in each account, you deposit 20,000 rupees. After that, you collect all that money from them, giving them a little bit commission, and use that money for terror funding. Can you stop it? You can't stop it. And how do you connect the dots? If the money, comes to that account and finally it goes to, the money is donated in some mosque, then it goes to that Jan Dhan account and then finally to terror fund. How do you relate that? How do you prove that in the court of law? Then we have a system where NIA would make 10,000, 20,000 page charge sheets for one single convict. By that time, they would have gone thousands of, 1,000 times ahead of you. So that's not the approach to deal with this. You need to change your legal structure. Currently, we are simply punishing the terrorists who are actually executing the act of blast. But there's a large part that goes before the bomb goes off. That is the element of this zone of radicalization. We have no legal framework to tackle that. In a small district, umpteen number of mosques are coming, umpteen number of schools are coming. Where is the funding coming from? We don't have any idea. One more thing. Countering the narrative. So as far as the counter narrative is concerned, I see two domains. First is religious domain. Our efforts completely lacking. I'll just give you one example. When this whole blasphemy issue disturbed the entire country, this Nupur Sharma episode, what did we do? We got completely rattled and we were like, found completely unawares. We had no answer, no clue. What should we have done? You could have invited some good religious scholars from Saudi and instituted an inquiry. We are no one to decide whether she was wrong or right, because we are not religious scholars. Public mandate is no criteria to decide whether she was wrong or right. They could have brought some good, very people of high, religious scholarship from Saudi Arabia or even India, instituted a board and then investigated the matter. But we just panicked. This is just one example. So you need to create a robust counter narrative. And for that, counter narrative has to come from this religious community from within. It cannot come from outside. Second counter narrative is in the academic world. India has been the victim of terrorism for more than last 3-4 decades. Tell me what literature we have produced. Best book on Lashkar-e-Taiba, who writes? Christine Fair, Stephen Tankel. What are we doing? What are our think tanks doing? Give me one example where our scholars have written good peer-reviewed papers in international journals. Just shouting on TV debates or writing some rubbish pieces for the local media will not help. You need to provide concrete evidence and you need to respect the scholars. Unfortunately, here I have come across scholars who, after they get into the job of the academic lecturer, professor, and even secretly they are writing some examination to get into some civil service or something like that. Or some people who are getting the scholarship, they are looking at political positions. That doesn't help. You need serious, strong researchers, field level researchers. We don't have the literature on terrorism. Where are the interrogation reports? You don't get access to the agency's interrogation reports. They are the real gold mine if you want to study terrorism. Rohan Gunratna has done some excellent work on Al-Qaeda. That book is considered like a Bible on Al-Qaeda. Why? Because he got access to those interrogation reports of Al-Qaeda militants. Whatever literature here, that's completely superficial. I wrote 2 books on terrorism. First one is Radicalization in India and Exploration, and second one is Terror Financing in Kashmir. I can tell you, I got no help, no support from anyone. Since I was working in Kashmir, I could create my own network, really meet the proper militants, Hawala coordinators, and the intelligence officials, army chaps, religious clerics, journalists, and from that very intense and very extensive field level research, I could bring this product, and I sent the script to the Routledge. And you know how international publications are. They have a very strong anti-India bias, and most of this genre is controlled by the Westerners. But even after that, the research was so intense and it was so well concrete, well evidence-based, that they could not refuse the manuscript. They made me change it at several times. You know, I refused to change. But you have to bring that quality. Unfortunately, we're lacking in that. So you need a complete, revamping of the entire system. That's all I have to say. Well, I can go on and on, but, my apologies if I exceeded my time.
Thank you, Dr. Pandya, for a very, very incisive examination of various aspects of terror financing. Also, I've learned a lot from what your comments on intelligence, policing, and other things. I do agree that the interrogation reports give a lot of information and form the basis of an excellent analysis. And this is something in India, perhaps, which I also feel that, some of the best important information gleaned out from the British war papers, which were released after 50 years, became the basis of books, say, Liberty or Death by Patrick French, where so much of information was gleaned. And I think it's time in India, too, that beyond a certain number of years, all these papers should be made public for the researchers and professors to look at and form the basis of good analysis. Terror finance is a huge subject, huge subject, there's no doubt. And from September 9/11, when the FATF got into the act, many countries, they started making these acts like the PMLA, which is all over in the world. And in fact, in US, it started with the drug cartels. But here, of course, it had focus on terror financing. And since then, of course, we know PMLA has come a big way, with ED playing a great role and having returned thousands of crores of assets back to the banks, apart from the tracking the terror funding. Now, madrasa is a very, very important subject. The madrasas in Pakistan are, of course, different from the madrasas in India. There have been attempts to modernize the madrasas, and somewhere it is successful. All over it has not been successful. Also, he has talked about the religious response, the economic response, and I think there's a lot to deliberate upon, and I'm sure the participants would have gained much. Summing up, let me say that, let me question, what should a mature state response be to the activities of the NGOs? NGOs are there all over the world. I mean, I remember going in 1993 as the special assistant to the environment minister in Copenhagen on climate change, and the entire place was under siege by the Greenpeace. Anywhere in the world, I mean, if you go, these international organizations who are dealing with various aspects, whether they are anti-nuclear, whether they are, talking about human rights, they're talking about human index, and some of them really grown large, and they are questioning almost everything. Human index report, press report, rating of democracies, etc., etc. Now, the first thing would be to chase them away. Second would be to completely block them, raid them, or could be to ascertain facts and put it up for the public. The frontiers of war have changed, agreed. Standoff weapons are used. First, it was the artillery. Now it is cybersecurity, which can be operated from China. It can hit your core sector. And one of them, of course, is influencing the civil society through the social media. It can be the powerful NGOs. But think of something that today India is a rising democracy, whether it's military power, economic power, as somebody which is teaching yoga to the entire world.
And in democracy, there'll be questions. There'll be a lot of questions. I agree with Dr. Behera. The approach should not be a vigilante approach. It should be it should be a more mature response. You know, the instance of what you call vibrancy in democracy is when there are more and more questions. How does it matter? Does a robust democracy in a country of strength like India can be affected by a few agitations here and there? Yes, the terror funding is a different issue. The subversive organizations are a different issue. But NGOs alone, as Dr. Prabhu has said, some of them have done remarkable work in women empowerment, financing, so many other things in education, health sector, anti-polio. With that, let me say that it has been a very, very fruitful session. I must thank all my 4 speakers again, who spoke with their in-depth knowledge, with a lot of research, very incisive in their address. And thank you once again, the organizers who have done a brilliant job by organizing this conference. Back to Harkish.
Thank you, sir. Sir, how should we approach the Q&A, sir? So should we take it one by one, or should we just combine few of the questions, sir?
Oh, no, you can take them one by one and you can do it. Just ask them who they want to ask and let the person answer, but keep it for another 15 minutes because I also have to catch a flight now back to Delhi from Bhopal.
Definitely, sir. Sir, then I'll begin with the first speaker itself. So there was a question, I think the first question has. Yes, sir.
I can read the question. So the first question is about should we tag the institution which is receiving foreign funding as a foreign agent? See, this itself is a very complicated question because the idea of recognizing someone as a foreign agent requires you to have officially recognized lobbying with the political parties and the other institutions. And I don't think our country has thought in that direction. We still has, as a country, we still have a lot of reservations about bringing foreigners to lobby with us. And I think that is exactly how the colonial power grew in India. And I still think the Indian institutions and the Indian intellectuals still believe foreign capital is not a healthy thing to come. And they always want to put dams around it. So the question of tagging it as a foreign agent will come subsequent to India first recognizing lobbying as a profession or as an activity. So I think that will answer the question. Second question, FCRA doesn't allow cash funding. All the money that you receive has to be received in a bank account which is kept in State Bank of India in Delhi. So there is no way money is received to the NGO and the FCRA route in any model other than receiving in a bank account. Yes, there is a lot of money that moves around through Hawala and irregular channels, I'm sure. So Dr. Pandya also would join in when he is answering his own questions about how Hawala amount of money moves on. And another very important topic that I would like to inform everyone, terror financing is not expensive. A terror activity doesn't really cost more than $1 lakh or 2 lakh to conduct, a bigger activity. It doesn't require a large amount of money or anything. Imagine, I'm sure even the movies you would see these days, people just buy a bunch of dry fruits, weapons, and and go in hiding. But running overground network, that costs a lot of money. Giving them intellectual car fire, that costs a lot of money. Giving them ideological routing, giving them recruitment platforms, that costs a lot of money. I think our attention should be diverted towards these soft activities, not the hard activities. The hard activities only, until and unless the soil is not tilled properly, the seeds cannot grow. There is always unrest in some pocket or another country all the time. So unless and until someone comes and gives it a shape and direction, which is what I think Dr. Rami Desai was also indirectly hinting at by talking about the church assumes the role. Because now it is no longer a church, it's basically a group of people with a common agenda. Now that agenda changes with the shaping of the concept of their own identity, which may be unwittingly done by the church. But the concept of identity, if the whole process of creating that identity is differentiated from the national identity that we seek to see among all of them, yes, then we have a problem. I think the infiltration is not really, at least in the Northeast. I studied in Northeast. I still have a lot of good friends in Northeast. I think there in that point, the problem is basically infiltrating the whole concept of identity itself, the shaping of identity itself, not the final outcome of identity. How do you see yourself? That I think is a big problem. Now, another third question, which is very interesting question, is about decentralized cryptos. The challenge in decentralized cryptos, generally speaking, cryptocurrencies is, it is very difficult to identify the owner of the cryptocurrency wallet. It is only a result of a law enforcement operation. So once we identify, then it will be treated as an asset. And it will be forfeited or attached and moved, pretty much like your car or a bank account or anything else. So that is how it comes. Yes, I do see a lot of activity happening, collecting money in Ethereum, collecting money in other places through cryptocurrencies. But the money eventually has to be withdrawn. And when it is withdrawn, it generally gets caught. I still remember, whenever I talk about crypto forensics to law enforcement and others, I give an example of a wallet which was used to fund the Sri Lankan Easter attacks. The Easter attacks happened in September 2019. The wallet, the last money it is received is in May 2021. Someone is still funding it. So the way these things are caught is when they withdraw the money, not when they are giving. And another question that I see is Mr. Utkarsh Garg's question. How should we regulate whether these NGOs that are working for betterment and that is doing propaganda like jar source? This is a very, very interesting question. See, think about this. If I'm a terrorist organization, I'm trying to fund or incite or create any fault lines in India, I know that if I send money to an FCRA registered NGO, I will be caught. So differentiating which is right and wrong is always going to be the job of the intelligence agencies. Because you cannot expect an organization which is regulated to furnish all the details which you can use to point it out. It is like asking Osama bin Laden, who is on a sanction list, to come and open bank account in his own name. He knows that the moment he gives his name, you will flag him. He will not give. So the separation and segregation tagging is always going to be driven by intelligence. And I think it must be done in that way only. But I also believe intelligence agencies in India, their powers are very, 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 very opaquely defined. I believe in the interest of everyone and the interest of national security, I think we deserve a big national security law which regulates, empowers, and enhances the scope of intelligence agencies. At the same time, and the way they deal with the other law enforcement agencies, be it ED, be it NIA, or be it the counterterrorism unit, or be it other places. So some element of clarity there always certainly helps. I know civil services as a unit has their own camaraderie. So the camaraderie is what that saves the day most of the times. But I believe having a legal framework will certainly enhance coordination and cooperation in a much larger sense. I hope the same answer applies to news portals and others. But that being said, if you observe an FCRA organization spending money on, let's say, ABC items, the ABC item is political, that is already covered in the new amendment. Media is something that we must again add. Once you add these 2-3 items, you are able to openly create a deterrence for funding. That I think will be a good way to handle this. But just to summarize again, segregating which NGOs are involved in terrorism, overground work, segregating which NGOs are doing open cover, providing cover fire for the extremist organizations, be it the Maoism or another, or even the Chinese interests or the American interests or any other interests. I think that can only be done in an intelligence, through an intelligence organization, not done through any other means. It is not feasible because obviously a lot of details will never be shared through a proper channel by any of these agencies. So it has to be a deep intelligence-driven organizational effort. So I hope I have exhausted the questions that are pointing to me. Have I missed any question, Arjesh?
Right. Not to my knowledge, sir. I think you have answered all. Thank you, sir.
If there is any questions, please feel free to email me. I'll be very happy to engage. These are topics that I really like, whether I'm in service or not. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. So, should we take the questions for Dr. Anshuman Behera, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Argish, I'm not sure whether Anshuman Behera sir is there because he said that he has some assignment.
Sir, I think he's present.
He's there, but I'm not sure about whether he's present there in front of his screen.
Okay, sir.
Then we can Rami.
Yeah,
Desai.
I'll be happy to take the questions now. I think I saw one or two interesting questions. So I think I'll just answer them as a whole. Number one, do I see external forces involved? Of course, in the Manipur conflict, where it's a multi-layered conflict. No longer are conflicts, to be seen from a singular lens. There are always different sorts of factors that play into it. But the factor of external forces, yes, there is. There is multiple sort of factors of external forces in terms of not just illegal immigration coming in from Myanmar. Myanmar is conflict-ridden. UNODC reports say that poppy cultivation, because they've started using higher, more mechanized ways of doing poppy cultivation, the yield has gone up and the quality has gone up. Therefore, it's 4 times the cost now than it was 5 years ago. So this has become something that is, a more, how would I put it, a type of farming that is preferred to growing, any other sort of crops, because obviously what you get out of it is a lot more. There is also this sort of, vested interest that plays in communities about transnational ethnic relationships. That is very well, but we have to understand citizenship counts for something. Transnational ethnic relations also can be countered, just like the terminology, the umbrella term of the Naga, the umbrella term of the Kuki, there are multiple other smaller tribes within these larger tribes, and these were largely umbrella terms given for administrative functions by the British, so all of these ideas can be countered. However, one has to keep in mind that there is a reason that there are boundaries. There is a reason that there is citizenship, and until and unless that is respected, then you are going to have problems. Internationally, also, we've just seen David Cameron comment on the Manipur conflict. We saw the EU, which has problems of its own, commenting on the Manipur conflict. It cannot resolve the problems that it has within, let alone understand a complex situation like Manipur. We've had the US comment. We've had them put us on lower rankings than some of the worst countries in the world because of some perceived communal difference within the Manipur conflict. So, of course, there are international vested interests as well. People are writing about it. I don't see us being overtly interested in what's happening in Malmo right now. We don't even know where Malmo is, but the highest amount of radicalization and the kind of anti-Israel protests that are coming out in Malmo is shocking, But, obviously there is this sort of an interest in which we have to deal with. And as, Yashovardhan sir said earlier on, as India grows, and becomes a center point, for the world, that kind of attention is going to increase. And we will just have to learn to be smarter, more robust, and have more rigorous intellect, to be able to counter this. Now, I will give you a personal example, in this Manipur conflict, I've always laid low for the last 17 years of my fieldwork because it makes it easier for me to go into the field. Now, I have had, and we've just seen an example of this on the chat box, I have had a whole group of people that troll me, and it is not limited to trolling any longer. People have wished upon me gang rape, people have wished upon me death, people have taken my father and my mother's photographs and tried to cancel me, just the way we saw today, wherein your scholarship is questioned, you are an easier target. And mind you, I never use the woman card, but you are an easier target because you are a woman. Now what happens is most people will say, okay, rehne do, because this is too much, However, if your scholarship, your rigor, and your knowledge of the topic is, in your opinion at least, rigorous enough, then one should stay the course, And when it comes to biases, because there was another question about narrative biases, I think this goes for all young people, including David. Read the whole article, listen to the whole talk. Because when you do that, you understand what the other person is saying in entirety. For example, we have become, like I said earlier on, we've become used to reading, either tweets or reading Instagram posts and making an opinion. Now, this is perhaps the most dangerous thing to do in this sort of cancel culture and fight of narratives, because you might just be making a fool of yourself. Many people during the Manipur conflict raised 2 questions. They said, oh, there's no illegal immigration happening. You're lying because you're trying to defame one community. Number 2, that you have not spoken about those 2 women who were paraded naked. because this is something that I have had to deal with. That I've spoken about it on all national television, saying the Meitei community should come out and hand over these perpetrators, because that would be a hand of sort of a gesture of goodwill. Illegal immigrants, it's a fact. It's not just a problem of Manipur, it's been a problem across the country. Assam wouldn't be having the kind of problems it does if there was an illegal immigration, So these are the kind of things that we have to become more rigorous in. We have to listen better, understand better, have a scholarship in the right place, and be rigorous to avoid wrong narratives, And unless we read long form, we are not going to be able to deflect the sort of nonsense that comes towards us. And when it comes to cancel culture, the fact of the matter is, we've seen this in America. You can try to cancel people and say it's, on the basis of a higher moral ground. But you don't like it when you're cancelled. When the Columbia students were arrested, they didn't like it, but it's okay for them to cancel everybody. So these are narratives that are being built, which need to be countered, irrespective of the trolling and irrespective of the kind of negativity that you face in modern modes of communication. I think these were the two questions of wrong narratives and this thing that were addressed to me. If there's anything else, I'll be happy to answer. And also,
yes, ma'am.
Also, when you have 15 minutes, it's impossible to address one entire region from all its lenses, and I would hope an academic to understand that.
Yes, let's go to Dr.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. First of all, we would like to, I think I can speak. I'm sorry, sir. You say something? I'm sorry.
I think let's go to Dr. Pandya now because we are running short of time.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So just few words. I think I can speak on behalf of the entire organization. The comments made by the said person were highly condemnable, and we are very sorry if it caused any form of discomfort. That our platform was used to surface such views. They are it's absolutely abhorrent what the person said, and
that's very kind of
we are very sorry. Genuinely
you don't
very
need
sorry.
to apologize. Nobody needs to apologize. That's very kind of you. And I think this kind of civilized debate is exactly what we should be aiming at. Thank you.
No, Dr. Rami, Arish has done the right thing and that he has apologized. And we certainly feel that you're one of our best scholars and you don't need to be. Yes, Dr. Pandya.
First of all, I really appreciate what Mr. Azad said in his last remark. You raised a very, very important question that what should we do with the NGOs? Because, sir, as you rightly said, NGOs are very, very critical to this country. They are very important for us. They are doing excellent jobs, particularly in a country like India where our governance happens to be in a very bad shape. NGOs are important and they are required. So if we make this entire issue a political issue and start a purge against them, then we are going to end up in an even worse situation. So I think we need to differentiate and we should look at some really the solutions within the system. And according to me, I think domain expertise is required in creating a skilled and motivated brass of professionals in the intelligence agencies and investigative agencies will be very helpful. And apart from that, it won't be that if they're really motivated, they're doing some really minute, nuanced work. It won't be that difficult to separate those NGOs which are working towards terrorism. And while doing that, we can also look at what the other countries are doing. Because like in the US, I came across several examples where there used to be one coordinator or one courier, which would deal with the charity like Al Khidmat Foundation. That charity would be receiving some funding from the US based, like ICRA or ICNA or something like that. And then that fellow would be transferring or facilitating the money transfer to Hizbul Mujahideen. Those such coordinators must be identified. There are few people. They must be identified and they can be neutralized through covert ops also. And if you look at it, this is very beneficial in terms of cost benefit analysis. If you start an inquiry against a big NGO, that will involve hundreds of your NIA senior officers and lot of travel and lot of paperwork and lot of money involved. Rather than doing that, the cost will be too high. If instead of that, if you identify such key coordinators and neutralize them through covert ops. You do your job at a much cheaper rate, and since one person is gone, entire network collapses. That's first part. Now coming to my questions, demonetization on hawala and terror financing. Yes, I mean, I would say that definitely there was an impact. No, I mean, it did help, but well, to what extent? I'm not really, I mean, I'm not the best person to answer that, because you require access to the confidential data which is with the government. But yes, there were symptoms, because terrorist organizations started looting banks and all because of demonetization and all the other various measures which government took. And more recently, the militant groups in Kashmir, they have resorted to drug smuggling, the narcotics, which is the most time-tested way of raising funds, because you bring one small packet of cocaine and heroin and it sells for like 5-6 crores. That's the best way. So this whole this new strategy of coming back to this primitive, this old method of terror funding shows that demonetization had some impact. But I must say that while looking at I think my another question is on crypto financing and all that. Well, these different methods like crypto finance, they're like buzzwords. Okay, they sound very fancy, that whether crypto finance has become a major thing in Kashmir or not. Okay, I think that's not the fundamental issue. Okay, the crypto financing, if they're not using now, they'll definitely end up using in the future. But the more important part here is that Pakistan-sponsored terrorist groups, they have a very fine system of using different ways of generating funds. And some of the ways are much more sophisticated than your crypto financing. Like they're raising money by selling MBBS and engineering seats. Mr. Azad, since you served in the organization, so you must be knowing about that. They were selling these MBBS seats to the kith and kin of deceased militants, and after that they made it a business. Mr. Gilanis and all these Shabir Shahs, they were allotted a certain number of seats by Pakistan. They would sell it to ordinary Kashmiris, get the money, like let's say ranging from 10 lakhs to 25 lakhs. That money would be distributed among the terror groups and extremist groups in Kashmir. In Pakistan, ISI would take care of those students. This is very fine example of raising money. Another way of raising money was through the LOC trade, which was again banned. So they have multiple ways. So I mean, all those who are researching in this area, my advice is that don't go by these buzzwords. Definitely, I mean, this is important. Crypto has come up, so they will be using, but then just get a better picture of in a very holistic manner. Second question is that what can perhaps be done, and basic reforms can be done at the state and national level. Well, here I must say that terror financing, particularly, I mean, when we are talking about the measures to counter terror financing, that is the forte, that's a strict prerogative and domain of our intelligence agencies and investigation agencies. So whatever reforms are needed, they are needed in that setup, because as an ordinary researcher or as a master's student in international relations or as someone who is organizing this big think tank debate, you're not going to do the investigation, frankly speaking. Okay, you'll never be the part of that. Okay, and you don't need to be the part of the investigation will be done by the police officers. So I think we need experts in that area, and there are many ways to do that. You bring people from the revenue services, you bring people who are experts in this technical area, and they can assist the officers, and you can bring people who are researching on the ground. Yes, from the outside, what the agencies can do is that they can bring researchers on board who have some ground level knowledge of this terror funding and all that. So that can be done. That's my take on this. Thank you.
Sir, one small thing to add.
Thank you, sir.
Just one small thing to add, sir.
Yes.
There's been a lot of good research on elimination of the leadership and its impact on the terror movement. I think I think the results are pretty mixed. So in some cases it becomes even worse, and some cases the organization dies. I mean, that will be another area that probably I think people can look at.
So okay, so very interesting, Mr. Saikrishna. Definitely, that's there. But then
sure, sometimes we can take that offline. I think time is up.
Some organizations, they survive on the leadership structure. Like you just see Hizbul Mujahideen Kashmir. Until Riaz Naiku was alive, he was one of the longest surviving militant, and the organization's morale was very high. I think the security forces made umpteen number of attempts to neutralize him. They failed. Then it became a myth that Riaz Naiku is invincible. The day he died, after that, Hizbul Mujahideen is more or less dead.
Let me add something here, that this would require a separate debate in which I would like as a speaker. So But as far as the NGO debate is concerned, let's close it now. I have had a wonderful time with you youngsters, each one of you. And in fact, in the question answers, again, a lot of things have been brought about, which are very, very interesting. So let's close this session now. Extremely fruitful, extremely useful. And thanks to all the speakers again.
Thank you.
Thank you a lot, sir. Grateful.
Thank you so much, Yashovardhan, sir, for chairing the session. I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Anshuman Behera, BVS Shri Saikrishna, sir, Rami Desai, ma'am, and Dr. Pandya, sir, for their insightful discussion. With this, we have come to the end of our first session. I request the audience to join us for the second session. Thank you, everyone.